welcome back to PSA TV. This is I Own Labor. I am Christy Kali Singh, and joining me on the phone right now, I've got PSA activist, Mr. Oral Saunders. Good morning to you, Mr. Saunders.
Pleasant good morning to you, Comrade Sister. Pleasant good morning to your staff and your crew, the President and the Executive, and of course the members of the Public Services Association and concerned citizens. A pleasant good morning.
How are you this morning?
Well, a bit tired. I've been very busy over the past couple of days. A lot of things have been happening.
Yes.
So, I have been involved in a lot of stuff.
Yes. I know that you've had a lot of questions and a lot of concern when it comes down to the Nursing Council of Trinidad and Tobago. Any further updates there?
Sure. I am extremely pleased to report to you, and as I said, the national community, that due to our activism and our constant prodding for answers, I can safely say that the Nursing Council of Trinidad and Tobago, the election has been halted, and I'm extremely pleased to report that.
So, is there any dates that it may be set for the future or anything like that? No.
Well, probably I should just try to give our listening audience a little backdrop.
Yeah.
This is actually the third time within recent months that the elections for the Trinidad and Tobago Nursing Council has been postponed for some reason or the other. And I, being a candidate in the election, I was able to be privy to seeing exactly how this election was being dealt with, how it was being treated with, and I was very much displeased. And let me take the opportunity to also thank you, Comrade Sister, for the opportunity to speak out on the matter, because I know for a fact that we would have had over 500 views on the PSA TV and our interview that we held. And clearly it has resonated far and wide amongst persons who would have been in a position to really listen to the voice of a candidate and listen to my voice stating categorically that something terribly was amiss. So therefore, as I said before, I am pleased to state that based on the numerous calls that I would have received, the numerous statements via social media that persons were speaking out from within the nursing fraternity, clearly they would have resonated to the effect of having the persons who are responsible for conducting the election bringing it to a stop. Although my information is that it was not voluntarily stopped, but actually forced to be stopped. Because what would have transpired is that I would have already contacted my attorneys to file an injunction to prevent the election from actually taking place. And not only myself, but I was aware that another organization would have also put mechanisms in place to really hold the election. But what transpired earlier this week was that the Nursing Council would have had a meeting, and it was discussed in terms of the problems that members of the nursing fraternity were experiencing. And those were problems such as, one, many persons, even to date, did not receive a ballot.
Yeah.
Two, it is alleged that one of the candidates was responsible for dropping off the ballot boxes finally, but you would recognize that something clearly would have been amiss for a sitting candidate, one of the incumbents, to actually be handling a ballot box. And our information is that that person was responsible for dropping off ballot boxes to several of the major health institutions. Persons were also taken aback in terms of the communication between the council and persons who still would have discarded their ballots when they recognized that the election would have been stopped the last occasion, and there was no mechanism in place for them to receive a new ballot. Now, despite all these questions that were being asked, there was still a desire by certain individuals to ensure that the election continued. So instead of myself being a candidate in election, having to campaign to win a seat, what I embarked upon was to campaign against the process and against the election taking place. And as I said before, I am extremely pleased to state to the national community that the Nursing Council election has been stopped. I do not know what is going to take place, but what I am going to use your medium to do is to call on the President of the Nursing Council of Trinidad and Tobago to resign in light of the myriad of concerns and questions that nursing personnel have been asking throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad, and the fact that there have been 3 occasions that this election has been called and it has not materialized, and the fact that there is a perception, rightfully so, or maybe in error, but there is a perception that as long as certain persons remain in office while an election process is going on, there is a perception that something is wrong within the council. And I am saying that the president of the Nursing Council ought to do the honorable thing and resign so that we would be able to save and salvage some sanctity and some respect for the process. And he should not force the Honorable Minister of Health to have to ask him to resign, or for other members of the Nursing Council to move a motion of no confidence in him based on what would have transpired in the previous attempts of conducting an election.
So what exactly would it take for the election itself to be carried out, a free and fair election? What exactly? Because, I mean, you're saying now that it's because of, the Nursing Council lack of visibility and the failure to hand out the ballots as supposed to be done. What could be done to have the elections be free and fair?
Well, I think the best way forward is by the president of the Nursing Council tendering his resignation to the Honorable Minister of Health. I think that would in itself signal to the nursing community that we are now seriously looking at the mechanisms that we need to put in place. Secondly, I would want to suggest, humbly so, that the entire process be scrapped. I mean, from the beginning, from the selection of the election committee to the elections officer to the candidate, I believe every single thing should be scrapped. And I also believe that we must have some consultation with persons from the Elections and Boundaries Commission, which is an independent body and it is a state enterprise that functions independently, for them to look at the mechanisms that we would have engaged in the past and for them to make recommendations in how we ought to proceed going forward. And I really believe that an election should not be held within the next 6 months, or at least at best as the next 6 months, for us to truly put our houses in order, for persons to probably via social media using information technology, emails and so forth, for all nursing personnel to forward information as in their current addresses, so that even when we are to send out new ballots, there will be a new mechanism in place. Because unfortunately, as it stands today, the Nursing Council is still relying on the information that nursing personnel would have provided in terms of their addresses when they actually became nurses. So, for example, myself, when I came into the nursing profession, that was back in 1992. And the address that I used back in 1992 is where the ballot would have been forwarded to.
Right. So you're saying that the list is not updated?
Exactly. And that is such a basic, fundamental right that the Nursing Council should have been embarking upon prior to this election even being announced. And I also believe that maybe the time has come that we may not even be able to successfully reach each nurse at their personal home address, but we can utilize the method of going through the various hospitals, So, for example, all the nurses that are assigned to every major health institution, the nursing administrator, which is like the chief nurse of all the hospitals, has a list of all the nurses under his or her charge. And I believe that it is at that point we, in collaboration with the Nursing Council, should engage in updating information through that mechanism, through using the nurses that are in charge of each hospital, each institution. So therefore, we would have a phone number, we would have an email address, we would have an up-to-date mailing address, so that when we have to distribute ballots in the future, instead of relying on the postal system, what I believe we should be engaged in is giving the head nurses of those, well, the nursing administrators of those hospitals, the ballots for distribution. And we must also advertise through public media that the ballots would be ready at, let's say, for example, Port of Spain General Hospital on Monday, the 25th or whatever, and you let persons know that it will be available for a 1 week period at their nursing administrator's office, so it is easier for them to pick it up there. And if it is we do that throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, now we can ensure that there is a level of transparency so that all nursing personnel would be familiar and would be accurate with what are the latest developments. I think one of the critical issues going forward as well is better communication between the Nursing Council and the nurses of whom they represent, to embark information, to embark knowledge, and for us to know what is taking place. There's clearly a disconnect. So those are just some of the mechanisms that I believe need to be initiated as soon as possible to ensure that we not only have a fair election, but also a free from fear election, and that it is transparent.
How do you think communication can be made a little more better, or a little more effective, I should say, in terms of, between the Nursing Council and the entire, well, the candidates who are putting themselves up? Yes.
Yes. Well, I believe that clearly in the past, the Nursing Council has been like a foreign body. Although they are elected primarily by nursing personnel, and of course the minister has his group of persons he chooses, their job, their tasks have been done in such a way that very few people are aware of what they do. Now, although every nurse in Trinidad and Tobago, every nurse, whether you are a district health nurse, a midwife, a staff nurse, a psychiatric nurse, or, well, we call them mental health nurses, or an enrolled nursing assistant, every member of the nursing fraternity ought to be in direct contact or know, or at least be knowledgeable of what it is the council is doing, so that the council has to communicate and has to come out more on a regular basis to update nursing personnel of exactly what they do. Now, one of the complaints that I received during this election campaign is, for example, nurses requesting transcripts. Transcripts are an important document that nurses require if it is they would want to seek employment in a foreign country. Now, nurses, as you are aware, are in great demand throughout the length and breadth of the world.
Yes.
We are in competition with the entire world. You can leave Trinidad and go to England, to go to America, you could go wherever, Saudi Arabia, Australia, to perform. But what those professional bodies require is a transcript stating exactly what are your competencies, what qualification you would have had. So before you could be allowed to function and practice in that other country, you need to provide that information. And many of the nurses have complained that it is over 6 months they have requested these transcripts and they have never heard from Nursing Council, and it is almost as though it is a concerted effort to prevent them from leaving Trinidad. Now, my point is that that's not the role of the Nursing Council. What ought to take place is that the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, via the CPO's office and our union, is supposed to engage in negotiations that will compensate nurses to the effect that they will choose to prefer to stay in Trinidad and serve Trinidad and Tobago's population, our citizenry, as opposed to going to greener pastures. Now, many years ago, I was pivotal in working with the former executive in us staging one of the largest protest actions that Trinidad and Tobago has ever seen, which was in the year 2000. And this came about because there was a mass exodus of nursing personnel from Trinidad and Tobago. They were leaving, they were going to Bermuda, they were going to England, they were going to Saudi Arabia and so forth. And what we were able to pressure the government into doing is to initiate something called a nursing incentive allowance, which was really an allowance given at 25% of your basic salary given to you to assist you in meeting the demands of your job, one, and also as a mechanism to prevent you from leaving the country. Now, it did work to a certain extent, but you would recall that at present, nursing personnel as well as other public officers are still working on 2015 salaries as we speak.
Yes.
So therefore, the government may not be aware, but they should be aware that greener pastures, other countries that are in dire need of nurses, have begun their recruitment exercises. And Trinidad, as they see it, is a fertile ground for exercising such recruitment exercises. Because Trinidad and Tobago nurses, the quality of nursing is very much in great demand.
Yes.
And as long as it is in great demand, we will always, as a society, have to come up with mechanisms to try to treat with either the working conditions, because it is not only about money. I believe that deep down, where nursing personnel are concerned, they would like to know that the conditions of employment is of such that it is conducive of them giving their very best on every occasion when they assume duty.
All right. So we've been chatting this morning with former PSA General Secretary, Mr. Oral Saunders. Mr. Saunders, thank you so much for giving us that update with regards to the elections and the Nursing Council by extension. Mr. Saunders, they're of course calling for the resignation of the Nursing Council's president. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Saunders.
You're most welcome. Do have a pleasant day, as well as your crew and the executive and staff, and of course the members of our great union, the Public Services Association.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so there you have it. Elections have been halted. That is the nursing elections. And of course, Mr. Oral Saunders, they're calling for the resignation of the Nursing Council's president. This is PSA TV, and we have come to the end of today's show. I am Christy Kali Singh. On behalf of all of us here at PSA TV, here's wishing you a very blessed day.